welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Chandler and I like to talk about books. Yesterday I didn't feel too well and I was like, you know what, if I'm gonna be in bed all day, let's pick a book that we can completely finish. It ended up choosing was A Flicker in the Dark. This book has been popular for a while and I believe that they're turning it into an HBO limited series. So I'm gonna go over the synopsis of the book. We're gonna do the discussion questions that are in the back, so that will involve spoilers, but the beginning I won't spoil anything. Our main character is Chloe and she's 12 years old. Girls start going missing in her town. Chloe's father ends up going to jail for these crimes. This book takes place 20 years later. 20-year reunion. It's 2019. Chloe is a psychiatrist in Baton Rouge. Girls the same age start to go missing and something in her gut is telling her this is connected somehow. Chloe's gonna get to the bottom of this, or honestly, will she? There's your synopsis. You don't really need to know anything else in order to go into this book. I still won't spoil the plot, but I think that I should tell you a couple of my thoughts that aren't spoilers before you decide, oh, I want to read this, oh, I don't want to read this. I predicted the ending within the first 10%. It's so popular, and the fact that they're making it into an HBO series, I was like, maybe I'm thinking too simply here. Maybe I don't have any idea what's gonna happen. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's also why we like thrillers, right? We kind of get to play detective with them. The number one thing that I was like, that really turned me off to this book was the book flips in between timelines. Something traumatic happened to her when she's 12 and something's happening to her now she's 32, but they connect, so of course she's gonna keep going back and forth. There was no indication when she was going back. For example, in a single paragraph there would be a flashback, but also she was in the present reality. There was nothing in the way that it's printed that said, here's the flashback, here's present day reality. Like, we just kind of jumped right back into present day reality, and if you didn't pay attention to who she was talking to or what she was talking about, it could get really confusing. I read it on Kindle Unlimited, so I wonder if that has anything to do with it. I find that hard to believe because even her, it wasn't even italicized, and her inner thoughts, like what she was thinking to herself, that was italicized. So I was like, I would almost rather the flashbacks be italicized than like what she was thinking to herself, just because the flashbacks were obviously a giant part of the plot. It's almost like you have to read it to understand what I'm saying, but that's why I think maybe it would do better in movie or TV show form, because you're gonna be able to tell because there's gonna be two different actors. In the writing, I'm like, how did this get through publishing? There's no way. And maybe I just have like a pea-sized brain that didn't pay attention in language arts. To me, I've never read a book where there wasn't some type of indication, some type of difference in the way that flashbacks are written compared to the way that the present day is written. It is nice that it is on Kindle Unlimited, and I'll tell you right now, if it drives you crazy when they don't tie up every single loose end, that's what this book is. I still have questions. It ended on just such a brief note. Regardless if I didn't get every answer, some of the answers that we got were a little plot twist, so that was kind of fun. But we're gonna get into the discussion questions at the back of the book now, so if you haven't read it before and you don't want anything spoiled, then this is the end. Thank you so much for watching. But if you're ready to talk this book, let's carry on. Now that it's us, the ones that have read it, or you want it to be spoiled for you. Hey book bitches! I think that thrillers would be really good for book clubs because there's so much to talk about them. It's easy to judge them. Question 1. I thought I knew what monsters were. I feel like that line right there tells you that her dad didn't do it. That line tells you that whoever did it came out of left field. She wasn't expecting that. The way that she understood the word betrayal was elevated. Maybe the obvious monsters weren't monsters. That brings me to Bert and her being a psychiatrist. Like, read between the lines. He's hurt, bitch. He's so hurt. But we're not talking about that. My expectations for the rest of the book was just to say, you know what, her dad did not do it. Question number 2. I agree 100% with home being safety and security, but also somewhere that you can relax. I think some people can feel very safe and secure in their houses, but also feel on edge and anxious. More energetic, but also mental. Probably depends on the person and how well their relationship with their self is, because at the end of the day, like, I think maybe what you think of home is just a projection of what you feel. You know, my home is me, because wherever you go, there you are. What is Chloe's home? Her drawer of pills I'm a little irritated that that was never talked about after everything. The bitch still has an issue. I was a little bit nervous that like the cops were gonna find it. I think that her home was her brother. And I also think that her home was the memories that she had. She really loved Lena. So I think that sitting in that space where Lena was still alive and Chloe's inner child could look up to this being that she just thought was so beautiful and so whimsical and just so much fun and just this like really cool girl Lena was. I think that her home also resides in that younger version of herself. So she likes to go back and think about Lena. I don't think that my definition of home changed after this book, but I think that it did solidify that our inner child, just as human beings, does have a lot to do with how we see what a home is, should be, how we define it. Question 3. I'm gonna say a flicker in the dark. Number 1, that is out of context because I don't know what they were talking about. I can go back and look, but I'm just saying for these discussion questions, that is out of context. Okay, I went back and looked, and that was when she was at the fair with Lena, and Lena had her drink the vodka out of the Sprite. I knew there had to be context there. Yes, okay, so the lightning bug represented that glimmer of hope, that exciting new, I want to say hyperfixation, because she absolutely did hyperfixate on Lena. It's okay, we all do it to someone, something at some point. She was seeing life from a different perspective, so then she saw this bug from a different perspective that day. It was beautiful. That's the way that she thought Lena was beautiful. And perhaps the symbolism of her catching it that night was this shine, this sparkle, this twinkle, this light in her void she felt potentially was fleeting. So she caught it and she wanted to take it with her. Chloe might have been a little bit in love, okay? Talks about like her hips a lot. I don't think Chloe could decide or had decided whether she wanted to be Lena or be with Lena before Lena disappeared. Question number 4. Light and dark, yin and yang, love and hate. You can't have one without having the other. Question number 5. You need to figure out how to write the 2 different timelines. I know I already said that at the beginning of the video. Okay, you don't have to tell me twice, but I'm just saying, like, that was really confusing, and I think that this book could maybe gain a whole other point on the rating system from me if that would have been written differently. If that would have been printed differently, published differently. Like, but if we're not talking about that anymore and we're just talking about the past timeline and the present timeline, so much trauma happened to her when she was younger. Her idol being taken and then her dad being the one that goes away, goes on trial for doing the taking and the killing. But the whole situation with her mom, as a psychiatrist, Chloe should have in some way talked about how that trauma, like a part of her is still in the body of that younger version of herself, that 12-year-old version of herself, I believe. I think that's where a lot of home is. I think that she finds comfort in the memories. I think she almost finds comfort in what happened because she's able to go back to those memories. I know that that kind of sounds twisted. I don't mean it in a twisted way. I just think that that's the psychology of humans' brains. Some of the best times of her life, like idolizing Lena and loving her and everything, happened right before some of obviously the worst times of her life. So there's friction in those memories. Like, in a way, I think that the motivation for how she acted towards the girls in the case, she could have left it alone. Motivation for involving herself, really trying to gain closure and answers, was for Lena. The past events really set the stage for how she was going to react to the present day timeline. It was like working on this present day timeline, connecting dots, healed the dots that she failed to connect when she was younger. But she was 12. We don't blame you, you know? But I think that Chloe blames herself a little bit for that. Question 6. Okay, this question, like, the snippet that they gave us compared to the questions, to me, don't really go. So let me tell you what I think about the snippet, and then perhaps they do go with the questions. I don't know what I feel about that little snippet. Okay, when she says that, again, that's totally out of context. When she says that, she's talking about the police officer in her office, I believe, or when she goes to his office. Either way, she's talking about the police officer when she's talking to him. When she's narrating this part, talking about him, I think that that is complete projection. The way that she says that look, that shows the very first hint of concern, not for my safety, but for my mind. I think that that is something that she learned in being a psychiatrist, and so that's probably what she would think towards her patient. Look that makes her feel like her words are not to be trusted. I think that that's her mentally not knowing whether she can trust herself. The slow unravel is getting faster and faster, spiraling out of control. I think that that's her feeling these things and being taught how to observe these things in the human psyche, and then her observing it within herself, and she's like, that's what you think. Even though, like, the police officer hasn't been taught to think that way. You know, that's her being taught to think that way. Did I feel like she was a reliable narrator? Every time that she wasn't taking pills, I felt like she was a reliable narrator, and I felt like it was helpful that she was a psychiatrist, because then, you know, she was projecting the way that she saw herself onto others, so we could still get kind of a glimpse at what she would diagnose herself if she was the psychiatrist of herself. I think it was so smart to portray her like that. You know, we're always saying, just as a collective society, we're always saying, like, no one cares. At the end of the day, like, even what I'm saying to you, you may only be perceiving it in a way that you understand, not in the way that I understand. So I think that that was smart, because it was from Chloe's perspective. So everything that we got, even her interactions with other people, imagining all of this stuff. She was putting all of these pieces together, pieces that didn't actually fit, you know, like blaming the boyfriend, thinking, like, she had this whole case set up for her boyfriend, thinking that he was her boyfriend, thinking that this Aaron guy was a good guy. Like, everything in her reality made sense the way that she wanted it to make sense. Us not having the same education or way of looking at the world that Chloe does, we as the readers are able to be like, maybe that's not right. Maybe Bert isn't it. Maybe if I had convinced myself the same things about Daniel that she had, I would be flipping shit too. The puzzle piece that made me be like, man, maybe she's right, like that I felt like solidified the whole Daniel thing. When they were out on the kayak and she's looking at their venue, zooms in on the rocking chair, and then she's like, wait, I did recognize that girl. She has the flashback about him waving, and she's the first girl that goes missing. I'm like, damn. So then, with that being said, why would the brother choose that girl first? There were still some loose ends that weren't tied. She had such a good case for Daniel that it would almost have been better had it been him. Question 7. I was worried that if she didn't start paying closer attention to what she was doing, I know that she was like inspired to take the next step and the next step and the next step, but if she didn't pay closer attention to what she was doing, she was putting herself out there to look like a suspect. I just felt like that bitch was not being careful enough, and it just kept me on my toes, being like, let's pull it back. When she's with the search party and she picks up the earring, I was like, oh man, like, I can see where that is a complete accident. Others can just like use against her. I was a little worried that they were going to use that against her. I also think detectives can, when someone's trying to help like that, especially when she has a past with the same situation, like the way that he was talking to her or treating her, I felt like that was completely uncalled for. Pushed her even further. Why are you talking to her like that? Especially if you think someone has an issue or is too attached to a situation. Why are you talking to her like she has to prove herself now? I was a little bit irritated at the end, showing up to her old house by herself, talking to the girl on the floor without thinking like, oh, someone's gonna be here as well. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you're just talking out loud. Like, they could come up behind you. I was like, girl, we're talking to a boyfriend who she thought was the killer at the time. But she was like, she just told him, I'm gonna call the police. I'm like, bitch, you think that that's gonna stop him right now? That's just gonna make him act irrationally. So yes, I did think that she put herself into some dangerous situations. I was a little bit irritated that she never went to go see her dad. Like, come on, miscommunication trope. Question 8. This is literally not where the crawdads sing. That was my first thought. I think that maybe the summers play such an important part because the kids aren't in school, so they're around each other a lot more. One of the biggest symbols in this book is fireflies. Those come alive in the summertime, so if the summer plays an important part aside from the fireflies, then I missed it. It went completely over my head. I don't feel like the firefly symbolism was that good, to be honest. Question 9. Definitely not the brother. I think the part that was the most surprising was that she never went to go see her dad. A twist that I did not see coming was her putting the 2 and 2 together about her mother and how she's been talking to her mom, but she hasn't tried finding a way for her mom to be able to speak back to her, which I thought was actually a really good part of this book. That also pissed me off, okay? If Cooper came to check on you while you were talking to your mom for the first time in 20 years, I would just go right back. I don't know why she didn't go back to let her mom finish the conversation. That really irritated me. Also, what happened to your mom after that? Like, apparently she was in critical condition, and then we just never bring it back up? What happened? Also, you immediately think that she's gonna spell Daniel? I for sure thought she was spelling dad. That's where my head went, especially because she's never met Daniel. I'm like, there's just no way. She's spelling dad. She wanted to be right so bad that she got in her own way. Oh gosh. The kayak, and she looks to the wedding venue, and then she puts two and two together about the first girl and the rocking chair and Daniel waving at her. That wasn't a twist, but that was like a, oh shit, yeah. Oh yeah, he did that, of course. I was hyped when she put that together. I'm like, oh my gosh, he totally did wave. I did not think that one of the biggest plot twists was Erin being a puppet for Cooper, but I did think a plot twist was that she just has sex with Erin. No judgment, but kinda, because you're over here having a crisis because you don't know your fiance. You definitely don't know this guy. Question 10. Chloe, get your own therapist, okay? So initially I knew that it wasn't the dad. Like, I knew that he was doing the fall, and I'm like, who would he take the fall for other than one of them? So I thought for a second, I'm like, maybe it was her. Decided, first 10%, it's the brother, that the dad took the fall for the brother. I started imagining her reunion with her dad, which we never got. I was a little bit irritated for, and my hope for her dad is that he took care of himself throughout his prison experience. You know, it was 20 years. That's so sad. But my hope is that, you know, he took care of himself. He's jacked, he's fit, and he's like ready for life. And I'm hoping that she's ready to go to therapy, and they're gonna get together and they're gonna have a great relationship. Maybe he ends up with Daniel, maybe not. I know that this is all happy that we figured out who it was, but at the end of the day, like, let's not forget that it was almost like she wanted it to be him for a second. I want to know about the dad. I want to know his perspective on everything, what he saw, what he thinks as he learns the news. I'm curious about that side as well. As happy as I am that the dad's now out of prison, if he had just turned his son in the first place, 2 other girls wouldn't have to suffer 20 years later. Okay, I'm updating my Goodreads now, and I'm gonna give it a 2.75. And that's not horrible to me. That's not horrible. Like, I enjoyed it. It went fast. I got so invested for something that I didn't get the answers to everything. I couldn't get past the fact that we kept going in between 2 timelines, and there was no indication that we were in a timeline, and like, you know, and I was disappointed with the ending. I think 2.75 is a great score for my experience with it. Maybe it would be a 3, but I feel confident with a 2.75. Okay. I feel confident with a 2.85. Thank you so much for talking about Flicker in the Dark with me. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next video. Love you. Bye. Bye bye. Bye 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 bye.